Welcome to Direction Northeast. Hello, I'm Laura LaRue. This program is a presentation of the Mass Communications Department of Northeast State Community College. Turn on a TV, go to a movie, walk down the street, and you know what you'll find? Zombies. Everywhere you look, you see zombies. Direction Northeast comes alive with haunting information about the undead right after this.
Northeast State's a wonderful place to start your career in college, and the campus is beautiful, the teachers are one-on-one.
It was an excellent decision to come to Northeast State. I've learned so much coming here.
I love the school, and everyone is friendly here. This has been the best time of my life. I have really enjoyed being here.
I think if it hadn't have been for Northeast, then I wouldn't feel as happy and as driven if I chose another school.
Step by step, Northeast State is here to get you there. Enroll now at northeaststate.edu.
Vampires are yesterday's fad. If you want to be in today, zombies are where it's at. This program is an honest discussion about zombies with a man who is the leading global authority on all things zombie. He has been featured on National Geographic, Spike's hit TV series Deadliest Warrior, and G4 TV. He is head of the Zombie Research Society and wrote the book, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Zombies. Welcome to Matt Mogk.
Thanks for having me.
It's nice to be here today with you.
Yeah, it's always a good day when you're talking about zombies.
Well, why are zombies so popular in mass media right now?
That's a good question. You know, there are a lot of theories about it, but I really think that zombies, when you think about zombies, you kind of think about an apocalypse, like the end of the world. And I think when you look at the news, that's kind of what we're worried about. You know, you see disasters on the news every day, from the nuclear disaster in Japan to the concerns about global warming to, you know, on and on and on. They kind of look like the aftermath of a zombie outbreak. So I think that it's kind of the only monster that really fits in our understanding of this fear of like the end of the world.
Absolutely, doom and gloom. How does it make you feel that it's gaining in popularity?
Well, you know, I think it's a good thing. I've always been obsessed with zombies, and so I don't see any reason why everybody else shouldn't be obsessed too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for viewers who might not know, how do you define a zombie?
Well, you know, actually, in the Oxford's English Dictionary, the zombie is defined as it's only defined as a voodoo slave, because the traditional term of zombie refers to a Haitian voodoo construct of a person that believes their soul, that they died and came back to life, and their soul has been taken. And then they sort of are used to work in the fields as slave labor, and they're not inherently dangerous. They're nothing like the zombie that we think of in video games and movies today. So the definition that I use is that a zombie is a relentlessly aggressive, reanimated human corpse driven by a biological infection.
Interesting. Now, these biological infections, can you name some of these that we might be familiar with?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a couple diseases out there that are mutating in strange ways. I mean, one of them is mad cow disease. So mad cow disease in people is the symptoms have been evolving over the past 10 years, and it's starting to really kind of look like it could potentially become some sort of zombie sickness. And, you know, the film Zombieland from 2009, that was the basis of that film, is that mad cow disease turned everyone to zombies. So it's, you know, when you look at the science of it, it gets a little freaky.
Mm-hmm. I immediately thought of rabies, and I can think of like Old Yeller, kind of when he was in between the stage when they thought he was still a sweet dog and they locked him up and they knew that he'd been infected, and then one day he turned.
Yeah, you know, rabies is definitely a popular one, and I actually interviewed a virologist at the University of Miami who said that we could essentially take rabies and fuse it with several other viruses and create a zombie sickness today in the lab. So, you know, it's kind of depressing.
Scary and interesting. Yeah. You said they've kind of discovered a new one, and it's Jakob's something or other.
Oh yeah. That's actually it's an offshoot of this the mad cow disease is in people. It's called Creutzfeldt Jakob's disease, and there's a new form of it which is called variant Creutzfeldt Jakob's disease, and it causes people to go insane and often violently insane. And there are new indications that it's transferred from blood to blood. So actually, if I bite you, if I go violently insane and bite you, then you'll get it and you'll go violently insane. So that's when it gets scary.
And I read it affects predominantly younger people.
Yeah, it's traditionally it's been very difficult to get Creutzfeldt Jakob's disease, very difficult to transmit it. And what's happening now is this new sickness is affecting a lot more people in easier ways, and people traditionally that you would think would never get it are getting it. So.
It seems like a much more domestic approach to zombies that seems really real and close to home.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, yeah.
What is your greatest fear regarding zombies?
Well, I mean, I would hope my greatest fear is anyone's greatest fear, to get eaten.
Yes,
I don't want to get eaten. That would be my greatest fear. You know, I am honestly afraid of zombies. So, you know, I wouldn't like to be around zombies.
Now, as we discussed earlier, zombies is kind of a lucid term. Can animals become zombies?
Yeah, there's a lot of theories about that. I mean, first of all, I'll say that in our research at Zombie Research Society, we try not to make anything up. So we're not sure about any of this stuff. I mean, we don't, you know, we're not actively in a zombie outbreak. So it could be, but most prevailing theories are that zombieism only affects people. And when you look at many of the infectious diseases out there, they either are only involved, you know, it either only affects one species or maybe like a couple species, you know. But for instance, HIV, right? HIV is a virus that was in animals and was transmitted to humans. But in animals, it doesn't have any effect. It doesn't harm the monkeys at all. But it gets into us and it can be deadly, you know. So potentially it could be like that.
Yeah, one that comes to me, feline leukemia is very much the same way.
Yeah.
Well, what about like transfer through insects?
Yeah, like mosquitoes. Yeah, I mean that's definitely a scary thought, and it's an area of that we do a lot of research on. I think that if the incubation period of zombieism, like for instance, if I get bitten by a zombie and I don't immediately turn into a zombie, there is potential for mosquitoes to transmit it because mosquitoes don't attack dead things. So theoretically, they wouldn't go after zombies because they're cold-blooded and dead and rotting. But mosquitoes obviously do go after living people. So if I could be infected and not even know it, and I could get bitten by a mosquito, potentially it could transmit it, like malaria. Yeah.
Well, one of my greatest fears, I guess, of a zombie attack is, you know, what happens. And I think you've even written a book, children's book.
Right.
My mommy.
That's not your mommy anymore.
Yeah. What people have to have this kind of detachment. If indeed this apocalypse were to happen, we have to be able to essentially slay your loved ones.
Yeah, and it's really
to survive.
Yeah, it's really difficult. There was a book. There's a book called On Killing. It's a serious academic study of war and how people kill each other and things like that. And it's required reading at the FBI Academy and many other leading law enforcement agencies. And essentially, the book finds that 25% of the population won't kill someone even if their life depends on it. Like even if it's a stranger. Really? So like soldiers in battle will shoot high on purpose, even if they know they're going to get killed. Now, and it doesn't mean they're cowardly because they'll risk their lives to save other people and they'll do these really dangerous. But there's something in us that it's sort of like a survival of the species instinct where you don't want to kill other things. And the other interesting thing about zombies is that in animation, there's this theory called the Uncanny Valley, and what's been proven is that when you create a character, like an animated character, as it looks more and more like a human, like we start with this little 8-bit pixel square, and as we make it look more and more human, people like it more and more. So as graphics get better, people like it. But when it gets too human-like, it actually hits this huge valley where people don't like it. Humans do not like to see something that looks so human that we know is not human. It completely freaks us out, which is one of the reasons zombies are scary. So then on top of that, could be your mom, right?
Yeah.
Freaky. Yeah.
There appears to be a historical basis for belief in zombies. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, there are no absolutely proven zombie outbreaks throughout history, but there are 8 or 10 potential zombie outbreaks that we look at that are interesting and could lead to some sort of advancement in zombie research. And one of them is the lost colony of Roanoke, which was intended to be the first permanent British settlement in the United States in the late 1500s. And 110 settlers were dropped off in the United States on Roanoke Island off the coast of North Carolina. They built their settlement. They had food, etc. The natives in the area were not hostile. They didn't have any sort of threat. Their supply ship left. It came back 2 years later, and they were all completely disappeared. So it remains a complete mystery what happened to these 110 people. There's still no generally accepted reason for why they all disappeared. But one interesting thing is that 2 years ago, a archaeologist from Harvard found evidence of mass cannibalism on Roanoke. So you sort of then ask the question, why would these 110 people who weren't starving to death, who weren't engaged in some sort of war, why would they all turn around and eat each other? You know? So that's when you kind of raises the red flag in the zombie community.
Interesting. Well, from a literary point of view, what do you feel like zombies could be a metaphor for?
Yeah, well, I think it definitely is a metaphor for our concern about disease and infection, and that again, we know a lot about that today. You know, you hear it on the news all the time. Oh, it's bird flu, and no, it's swine flu, and it's next year it's going to be the next thing, and so it really is kind of it can easily be a metaphor for that. Also for the end of the world, but it's used a lot as a metaphor for dehumanization in general. So like, more people live in cities than ever before, and many people have jobs they don't like, and they work in these little offices, and they sort of dehumanize themselves across the board. And so zombies are often used as a metaphor for that. Any sort of way that in our modern society we are dehumanized.
Yeah, mass fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what is the link between The Walking Dead and cannibalism?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there is a new wave of living zombie. If you look at Zombieland or 28 Days Later, or movies like that, where the zombies are still alive. Like it's just a person who's infected. Because if we look at the traditional undead zombie, like a corpse that stands up and starts trying to eat you, technically it's not cannibalism because it's not a person anymore, right? It's something else occupying the corpse that used to be a person. But if I just get infected with a sickness that causes me to go violently insane and want to attack you and eat you, then I guess you would say technically I would be a cannibal. Right? I'm still a human being. So there are a lot of similarities, I suppose.
Well, what about zombies fascinated you and caused you to study them?
I've always been obsessed with them since I was really, really young, and I've just loved all horror movies, and zombies were always my favorite. And I think that zombies have always freaked me out. I kind of realized that I had never been as scared watching any zombie movie as I thought I would be in a real zombie outbreak. So I really liked watching zombie movies, but I always left the theater feeling like it would be different and a lot worse if it actually happened. So that's kind of what has driven my research and my obsession with it. It's like I really want to get to the bottom of okay, what would it actually be like? What would it actually be like if zombies showed up right now?
I think it's kind of like knowing your enemy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep them
sure.
close.
Yeah.
If it's something you're scared of, you really want to find as much as you can out about them.
Yep.
Well, I understand you're friends with Max Brooks.
Yep.
How has his work inspired yours?
Well, I think if you look at the Zombie Survival Guide, which is the book that he came out in 2003, the interesting thing about Max is he wrote that book in 1995, and it took him until 2003 to get it published. And at the time in 2003, there was really no other. It was like no other book out there. There was no other zombie literature at all. So he really was kind of groundbreaking in that area. Now there are zombie books all over the place, right? Another interesting thing about him is that World War Z, which is his next novel, also a big bestseller, came out in 2006. When it was going to come out, this will kind of show you how recent the popularity of zombies is. When it was going to come out, the publisher, it was called The Zombie Wars. The book title was called The Zombie Wars. Max Brooks called it that. And the publisher said, we don't want to have zombie in the title because we feel like it won't be marketable to a broad audience. So you got to take zombie out of the title. So he was like, okay, well, I'll call it World War Z. And granted, that's a great title, But imagine that. Even in 2006, publishers didn't want to have zombie in the title because they thought not enough people like zombies. Now you put zombies on anything. I've seen books that have zombie in the title, and there aren't any. It's not about zombies, and there are no zombies in the book at all. Crazy.
It's kind of went from the vampires to now we've got zombies.
Exactly.
But well, that's very interesting. Well, why did you become a part of the Zombie Research Society, or why did you? I understand you're the founder of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was really from kind of what I touched on. If I wanted, if I'm really trying to figure out what a real zombie outbreak would be like, I say, okay, well, I mean, the perfect example is if I want to know if a zombie needs to blink, what would happen to the eyeball? Like, what happens to the zombie eyeball if it's really dead and it rises, and if it's not blinking, and can it see? So I would call up the head of the National Academy of Ophthalmology and ask her. And so I was calling these real scientists and real doctors to figure out how this might work. And across the board, they kind of laughed or thought it was funny, but everybody was willing to help me pretty much across the board. And but what I found was some of the experts I called were actually really interested in zombies also. So for instance, like, there's a medical school professor from Harvard on our board, and when I called him to ask him a related question about zombies, turned out he was a huge zombie fan, and so he's like, oh, I want to be a part of it. So that's kind of how Zombie Research Society got started.
Well, I mean, even though it's hypothetical, some of this research is probably actually pretty useful for if we were to have a infectious disease breakout. I mean,
yeah, I think so, yeah. And I think it's also useful for if we have any sort of major catastrophic natural or man-made disaster, because the survival strategies are really the same across the board. So if you're really taking zombie survival seriously, it works for all sorts of things,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have a short clip on YouTube, I believe, and where you demonstrate some of the things that you would use to survive the attack. And I know a lot of that, the things you would take, such as a first aid kit and a tent, those are common things that you would take to survive any incident, be it flood or earthquake.
Or you need to worry about food, water, and shelter and security, and it's the same as if it's the same as if there's a giant earthquake in Los Angeles, where I'm from. The aftermath of that is the concerns you're going to have are the same as if it's a zombie outbreak. So.
Very neat. Well, much of your writing focuses on post-apocalyptic survival. How does this approach differ from other survivalist literature?
That's interesting. I think that there is some other post-apocalyptic survival literature out there. A lot of survival guides assume that society is going to get back online. So, for instance, we just mentioned the survival kit, right? Often that's called the 72-hour kit, and the reason why is the thought is that you need enough food and water and clothing to last 72 hours. Because if there's some sort of major event within 3 days, the government will come in and save you, or someone will save you, or things will get back to normal. But in a zombie outbreak, theoretically, things never get back to normal. So that's probably why I focused on it, and that might be a little different than some other, standard disaster preparedness guides.
Well, now, if we were to have an outbreak, about how long do you think it would last before it was over, or before everyone was infected?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's scary. In Zombie Research Society, and this is just, it's sort of a worst case rough estimate, but it's been estimated by one of the experts on the board who's a epidemiologist and starts studying diseases. He just studies the transmission of diseases. It's been suggested that in a worst case catastrophic zombie outbreak, only 1% of the global population will survive. So actually, Zombie Research Society members are called 1%ers because we strive to be among that 1%. But that's not good odds, right? That's not good odds. Yeah. So I feel like in worst case situations, it's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be short.
Absolutely. Well, what are some of the myths surrounding zombies? And do you think that if zombies were to be here, that they would prefer the brains over the other parts of the body, or what?
You hit on one right there. I mean, I think one of the myths is that zombies eat brains. I mean, zombies, from all our research, zombies don't eat brains. That really only showed up in the Return of the Living Dead film series from the mid-'80s. That's kind of a spoof movie series. But the notion is that you can actually test this, because the human jaw, the mouth can't open wide enough, the human mouth, and the human jaw isn't strong enough to actually bite through the human skull. So if zombies aren't using any tools, and they're not advanced enough to kind of crack your head open with a nutcracker or something, they're not going to be able to bite through your skull. So zombies don't eat brains. I think that the one other misconception that I always like to bring up is that zombies don't rise from graves. again, it's an easy thing to test because zombies don't have superhuman strength. They're biological in nature. They're a rotting corpse. So all you have to do is get in a coffin and bury yourself under 6 feet of dirt and see if you can get out. So even if zombies in the coffins in a cemetery, even if the corpses become zombies, those zombies would not get out of the graves. They would be stuck in the coffins. So actually, cemeteries are the safest place to go when you're stuck outside in an urban environment in a zombie outbreak, because it's the lowest population density. Nobody thinks go to a cemetery, right? So that's where I would go. I actually have, in Los Angeles, I have one of my bug-out bags, the 72-hour kit, hidden in a cemetery near my house.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now I know, this is very primal in nature, I know cats in the wild go for the jugular.
Right.
If a zombie were to attack a person, what body part do you think they would most prefer?
Well, the thought is that they would kind of go everywhere or anywhere. I mean, they're just kind of trying to get whatever they can. And unfortunately, unlike, a cat in the wild or some other predator, they don't even need to really get a lot of you because it's thought that it's such a toxic blood-borne illness that even if they get a little bite of any part of your body, you are doomed to slowly die and become infected and come back as a zombie. So they kind of win anyway, right? I mean, they win no matter where they get you.
Because even blood spatter
exactly.
can infect another human being.
Yep.
Well, now, if you were to fight off these zombies, what weapon would be your choice weapon? I know on your website you list like a baseball bat and a chainsaw, but I know not all of these are good for survival. What would you do?
Well, the first thing I would do is not fight if I could avoid it. Definitely. I would try to not engage in any sort of conflict whatsoever. But the weapon that I like, sort of as a standard, is something like a baseball bat. I mean, something really simple, like a steel pipe, something that's just like a basic bludgeon weapon that's easy to use and that doesn't have different sides, like there's not a good side and a bad side, It doesn't get stuck in things like blades do. It doesn't make a lot of noise like firearms do. Does require energy. I mean, if you're really going to beat a zombie to death with a baseball bat, it would take a while, right? Assumedly. But I wouldn't want to do that because I'm not interested in trying to kill whatever that zombie, in front of me. I'm just interested in getting away. So is anything to sort of help me get away,
Kind of the fight or flight.
Yeah, exactly. I'm big on the flight part.
The flight is survival.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. I have one last question for you. What is your favorite zombie movie of all time?
Yeah, I would have to say my standard answer is Night of the Living Dead, which is the original 1968 George Romero movie, just because it started the whole thing. It started this whole craze. It started our interest in zombies. There wouldn't be, and kind of all zombie experts say that. Max Brooks says it's Romero's world and we're all just living in it. He created it, so I think Night of the Living Dead is really kind of the movie.
Well, very interesting. Thank you for joining us today. This concludes our program for today. We learned about the world of zombies with guest Matt Mogk. Community is very important to the students at Northeast State Community College, and this program takes a look at a few of the subjects they find important. Until we meet next time, and on behalf of the students, staff, and faculty at Northeast State Community College, I'm Laura LaRue, and this is Direction Northeast.